My name is Barbara, 69 years old, living alone in the suburbs of Philadelphia after retiring from a nursing job I dedicated over 40 years to. That day was my grandson Noah's 6th birthday. I brought a special gift, a wooden train set I had spent nearly 3 weeks making by hand. As I reached the door, my daughter-in-law, Madison, glanced at the box I was carrying, then turned to her friends and sneered, "Grandma brought another homemade gift. Put it on the side table. It doesn't match the main table." That party had everything. Noah's name in glittering letters as a backdrop, a custom-made 3-tier cake, even a lavish check-in corner. But there was no place for me. The woman who once cradled that boy to sleep every night when he was still in diapers. Have you ever been pushed out of the picture your own family painted of perfection? If you've ever swallowed tears in silence at a gathering that should have been full of warmth and kinship, leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, because what happened after that party led to a quiet agreement that would change everything. I still remember clearly the day I stood at the edge of a desolate train platform, clutching the notification letter from the mining company where my husband worked. A tunnel collapse in Carbon County. No survivors. Ethan was just 8. He didn't cry. He just held my hand and asked, "Will Dad be home for dinner?" I pulled him into my arms, unable to find words. From that day forward, I was both mother and father. I worked night shifts in the emergency room at Mercy Hospital so I could take Ethan to school during the day. Sleep became a luxury. Some nights I dozed off in the patient waiting chairs and had to be shaken awake by coworkers. But I never complained, because I still had a son to fight for. I saved every penny in a small envelope hidden beneath the kitchen drawer liner. After paying bills each month, I'd tuck away a few extra dollars. 10 years later, I had just enough for a down payment on our first home. A small white house in the suburbs, with a front yard and 2 old oak trees offering shade. Ethan grew up quiet and well-mannered. Never flashy, but always diligent. When he was a junior in high school, I found out he'd been researching law scholarships online. I asked, "Why not pick something a little easier, honey?" He just smiled and said, "I want to help people like you and Dad. People who don't have anyone to fight for them." I said nothing, just turned back into the kitchen. That night, I quietly added a new envelope to the drawer. It was a student loan application. The day Ethan got his acceptance letter from Rutgers, I cried like a child. He told me not to worry about tuition, the school had financial aid, but I still picked up weekend shifts at a nursing home just to afford his first suit for his internship. I remember Ethan's graduation vividly. I wore a purple dress I'd saved since the previous Christmas, a wide-brimmed cream hat, and pinned a flower to his lapel myself. In the packed auditorium, I sat in the last row, clapping the loudest when they called his name. I didn't belong in the family photos of students whose parents were lawyers and doctors, but when Ethan turned around and raised his diploma toward me in the crowd, I knew every sacrifice had been worth it. Then Ethan got hired by a prestigious law firm in Manhattan. I sold our old house and moved into a small apartment near the train station so I could visit him more easily on weekends. Those were the days I thought my heart could finally rest. When Ethan introduced Madison, I was hopeful. She was beautiful, eloquent, always poised in conversations. Madison was the only daughter of an affluent family in Princeton, her father a surgeon, her mother on the board of a major charity, polished, stylish, and a little cold. At our first dinner, Madison's mother looked around my apartment and remarked airily, "Barbara keeps things simple. Reminds me of our early newlywed days." I smiled, pretending not to catch the undertone. Ethan changed the subject by telling a story about how I used to pack him tuna sandwich lunches in grade school. Everyone laughed, except me. Still, I believed that if I kept trying, they would eventually see me as family. I contributed a small amount to their wedding. Not much, but it was all of my retirement bonus. I hand-stitched linen handkerchiefs, embroidered their names in silver thread, and wrapped them in a velvet box. Madison opened it and said with a flat smile, "Thanks, Mom Barbara, very vintage." After the wedding, they'd bought a large house in New Jersey and invited me over. It looked like a magazine spread: walnut furniture, an open-concept kitchen bathed in light, and a gender-neutral nursery prepared for a baby not yet born. I'd brought homemade cookies and a childhood photo of Ethan in his elementary school graduation robe. Madison placed the cookies on top of the fridge, glanced at the photo, and said, cute, but let's store it away. This table needs to stay on theme." I stayed quiet, not because I was hurt, but because I realized I was slowly being erased from the life I had helped build. Then Noah was born. I hoped his arrival would mend the gaps, and in the early days, it seemed so. Madison called often, asking me to babysit, make soup, change diapers. I didn't mind the exhaustion. Being close to Noah brought me joy. But over time, the calls became only requests. "Can you watch him for a few hours? Can you do the grocery run for us? He has a doctor's appointment. Are you free to drive?" No more check-ins, no more shared meals. Madison began requesting money for things she claimed would benefit Noah: an educational toy set, an online interactive course, eventually private health insurance. Ethan simply said, "If it's not too much trouble, Mom." I was never troubled, but I did start to wonder. And at that birthday party, standing in a room filled with glitter and noise but no place for me to sit, I finally understood to them I was no longer family. I was obligation. But they forgot something. I may have quietly stepped out of their spotlight, but I was never voiceless. And when a mother who once built a life from scratch finally speaks, those who underestimated her will feel the weight of her silence. I started visiting Ethan and Madison's house more often after Noah was born. Madison said she wanted to raise the baby naturally, no nannies, but she ended up calling me almost every day. "Mom, I haven't eaten all day. Noah won't stop crying. Madison's too exhausted. Can you come help? Can you watch Noah for a bit while I see the doctor?" I dropped everything. I used to be a nurse. I understood how exhausting the early days of motherhood could be. I made homemade chicken broth for Madison, washed every cloth diaper, wiped spilled milk off the kitchen floor without waiting for thanks. I did all of it because I thought, if I don't help, who will help my child? At first, Madison would text things like, "Thank you. I'm so lucky to have you." But just a few weeks later, the thanks began to disappear. In their place came comments. "The diaper's a bit loose. I'll need to fix it later. Don't wash the soft towels with colored laundry. They'll fade. Breast milk needs to be cooled to the right temperature after heating, not just by guessing." I listened and took notes. 30 years as a nurse had made me used to criticism, but this felt different. This was my son's home, my own grandson. And the person delivering those critiques was my daughter-in-law, the same woman who once promised at her wedding that she'd always keep the family close. One morning, I woke up early to make a pot of oatmeal with poached pears for Madison, setting it carefully on the kitchen counter. When she came downstairs, she glanced at it and asked, "Did you put sugar in this? I don't eat refined sugar." Softly, I said, "Just 1 spoon of honey." She opened the fridge, grabbed a carton of almond milk, and shook her head. "I'll make a new one, but thanks. I'm sure it took you a lot of time." That thanks felt like a velvet-wrapped needle. I said nothing. I quietly stacked the dishes into the dishwasher. Every time Ethan came home, he'd find me either holding Noah or wiping something clean. He'd pat my shoulder and smile. "You're working too hard, Mom, but you get it, right? Madison's still adjusting." I smiled faintly, hiding how I felt like an unnamed fixture in that house. Not grandma, not a guest, not even family. Just someone necessary when needed, invisible the moment the doors shut behind me. One Saturday afternoon, I arrived earlier than usual. Noah had a mild fever. Madison had called that morning, but I had a dental appointment and told her I'd be a bit late. I brought a bottle of eucalyptus oil and some homemade ginger tea. When I walked in, Madison was sitting at the kitchen table, holding her phone, visibly irritated. She didn't greet me, just gave me a look as cold as ice. Next time, if you're going to be late, please say so. I had to cancel my body recovery appointment. I set down my bag, sat beside Noah, who was dozing in his crib. It's just a mild fever. I'll wipe him down and rub him with some oil. Don't worry. No reply. Madison kept scrolling on her phone. I thought the moment would pass. But that night, after I finished doing the dishes and was sitting on the porch, catching some fresh air, my phone pinged. A message in our family group chat, just Ethan, Madison, and me, from Madison, sent by mistake. Barbara's coming tonight. Get ready to pretend to be nice. I stared at the screen. Moments later, Madison quickly deleted the message, but it was too late. I had already read it. Ethan said nothing. No explanation, no apology. I turned off the phone, stood up slowly. I walked into the kitchen, picked up the hand towel I'd used, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table. Then I said, softly enough not to tremble, but loud enough that no one could pretend they didn't hear, I think I'll head home. Noah's asleep. Everything's clean. Madison looked up, momentarily unsure, but said nothing. Ethan just stood up, handed me my coat, scratching his head. Come on, Mom. Madison didn't mean it. She just says things sometimes. I looked at my son, the same little boy who once held my hand at a train station years ago, who once said he'd fight for those without a voice, now just quietly watching his mother be dismissed. It's fine, I said. I'm used to it. I walked out of that house that night not exactly angry, just hollow. I had never demanded to be respected, but it seemed the quieter I stayed, the more I was taken for granted. And perhaps the saddest part was that Ethan had grown used to my silence too. About a month after the text message incident, Ethan called me one late afternoon. His voice was hesitant, trying hard to sound casual. Mom, are you free? I wanted to ask you something. I was folding laundry in my quiet apartment. I had just picked up Noah from school the afternoon before. He'd played with Legos for hours without once asking for a tablet or snack. Such a good kid. It broke my heart to see how distant things were growing between me and his parents. What is it, son? I asked, folding one of Noah's tiny shirts into a bag. Ethan cleared his throat. Madison needs to get a few things for Noah. Books, school supplies, plus she wants to sign him up for a summer STEM program downtown. But having to ask you every time for money is kind of a hassle. I paused. So, what are you suggesting? Well, maybe you could give Madison an authorized user card. A credit card. Just a small limit for Noah's stuff. That way, you won't have to track every purchase. I was quiet for a few seconds. My heart sank a little. Every time I opened up, it felt like I was being nudged aside. But I still wanted to believe in Ethan. The boy I had raised, with every ounce of strength I had. All right, I said softly, but I'll set the limit at $2,000 a month, for Noah only. If anything comes up beyond that, just let me know. Ethan clearly sounded relieved. Thanks, Mom. You've really helped us so much. The very next morning, I called the bank to request a supplementary card for Madison, linked to my main credit account, with a fixed $2,000 monthly limit. I didn't set a transaction alert or spending password because I felt that if my daughter-in-law truly needed help, I shouldn't act like I didn't trust her. The card arrived at my home after 4 days. I placed it in a cream envelope, wrote Madison's name in careful handwriting, and delivered it myself. Madison opened the door, her face neutral as if she were accepting a parcel. Oh, the card's here. Thanks, she said, taking the envelope without opening it or looking me in the eye. I'll put it away. I'm busy planning the parent workshop for Noah's school. I nodded, forcing a smile. I hope it'll ease some of the pressure. Yeah, it's less of a hassle than having to keep asking you to transfer money. I stood there a few more minutes, trying to make small talk, ask about Noah, but Madison had already returned to her laptop and papers on the kitchen table, I took the hint and quietly let myself out. 3 weeks later, the first credit statement arrived at my house. I set it on the table while making tea, not opening it right away. There was a vague uneasiness rising in me, like every time I used to open Ethan's report cards when he was a child. I knew he was a good student, but it always made me nervous. When I sliced the envelope open and flipped through the statement pages, my hand trembled slightly. Total spent, $6,823. I stared at that number, thinking I'd misread it. The first charge, Nordstrom, $1,320. Next, Spa and Wellness Retreat, $870. A transaction at a luxury handbag brand, nearly $1,900. Round-trip plane tickets from New York to Miami, $540 for 2 people, no sign of a child included. Then a series of restaurant meals, from upscale sushi to Wagyu steak. There was only one charge I recognized as related to Noah, a STEM class registration fee downtown, $240. I set the teacup down, leaned back in my chair, trying to steady my heartbeat. I didn't want to think poorly of my daughter-in-law, but numbers don't lie. That evening, I sent a very gentle message. Madison, I just looked over the first month statement. It looks like there are some large charges I'm not sure are for Noah. I just want to make sure I understand the card's purpose correctly. He read the message within minutes and replied with just one sentence. Noah is Ethan's child, which makes him family. You shouldn't scrutinize every dollar like that. I read that line 3 times, each word cut across my chest. Not because of the money. I'm not poor, but because of the tone. The way she made it sound like I was the one in the wrong for even asking. I didn't reply. I turned off my phone, got up to pour another cup of tea, but didn't drink it. The water had gone cold. And so had my heart. I didn't tell Ethan. I figured maybe Madison had used the card for personal reasons, thinking I wouldn't notice. Maybe she was tired, maybe she was under pressure, but whatever the reason, I began to realize if I didn't draw the line myself, no one else would. And when someone starts treating your kindness as a given, your silence becomes consent. That morning, as I was making coffee in the kitchen, the landline rang. Hardly anyone calls the landline anymore, so I paused a bit before picking up. Hello, this is Colleen from Bridgeview Bank. I'm calling to verify the latest transaction from your savings account. A $15,000 withdrawal made yesterday afternoon at Branch 6 on Market Street. Were you present for that transaction? I almost dropped the coffee cup to the floor. I didn't make any withdrawal. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Yes. The transaction was carried out with an authorization letter bearing your valid signature. The documents were submitted by someone named Madison Whitman. Along with it was a photocopy of your ID and a signed confirmation from someone named Ethan Whitman stating he is your son and that you approved and instructed the transaction. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. $15,000. From the account I'd always considered my safety net, for emergencies, home repairs, Noah's future college tuition. Could you please send me a copy of those documents? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Of course, I'll email it to you right away. However, per protocol, if you didn't personally authorize the transaction, we will begin an investigation to verify everything. I thanked her and hung up, still clutching the countertop. Less than 5 minutes later, the email arrived. I opened the attachment. The authorization letter was printed on the bank's official form. The signature looked like mine, at least, a very convincing copy. Right underneath, a handwritten line, messy and definitely not in my handwriting. I authorize Madison Whitman to carry out transactions up to $20,000 on my behalf for family emergencies. Below that were Ethan's signature and his phone number. I grabbed my phone and dialed my son. It rang 5 times before someone picked up. Mom? Ethan said, sounding slightly hesitant. Where are you right now? I asked directly. At the office. Is everything okay? Do you know who withdrew $15,000 from my savings account yesterday? There was a brief pause. Then Ethan spoke, almost whispering. It was probably Madison. Maybe she needed it. For something urgent. Urgent enough to forge paperwork? I could hear my own voice trembling, no longer steady. No, nothing was forged. Madison told me to sign a confirmation because you'd said before that you'd help us if we ever needed. She said you approved it, so I thought... You thought I'd agreed to a withdrawal without saying a word? You signed off on it without even calling to check? I tried to slow my breathing, but the questions kept rushing out like a dam had burst. Mom, I thought... Madison said you were busy, that you wouldn't mind. She needed to make a down payment for an early education program for Noah and some physical therapy treatment for her neck and shoulders. I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because I was too angry to hold it in. Physical therapy? And what early education program requires a $15,000 down payment? Ethan went silent. I stared out the kitchen window, where morning sunlight had just begun to filter through the sheer curtains. A peaceful scene, completely at odds with the storm brewing inside me. When did this family start thinking they could take my money without even asking me? I said softly. Don't you see something wrong with that? Mom, don't make this a bigger deal than it is. You said you'd help. Madison was just trying to handle things in the most efficient way. I said I'd help. That doesn't mean I'm a walking wallet. Ethan sighed. Madison's just trying to manage everything. You don't understand the pressure she's under. You're right. I don't understand. I cut him off. Because I raised a son by myself, worked 3 shifts a day, paid for your education all the way through law school, and I never took a single dollar from anyone without asking. My voice cracked. Ethan, I trusted you. I believed you'd never let anyone touch what I've spent my whole life saving without my consent. He said nothing. So, I continued, slowly and clearly, you tell Madison that from now on, any financial matter, no matter how small, must have my direct approval. And if she touches my accounts again without it, I will involve my attorney. Still silence. Only when I was about to hang up did he finally whisper, barely audible. I'm sorry. I hung up. At that moment, I didn't feel like I'd won or lost. I just felt empty. Because in that instant I realized a lifetime of trust could vanish with a single signature. I went to Ethan's house on a Sunday afternoon. It was drizzling, just enough to chill my shoulders as I stepped across the threshold. I didn't call ahead. I didn't want to give them time to craft pleasantries or prepare excuses. I came to speak, clearly. Madison opened the door wearing gray yoga clothes, her hair tied up high, her face bare but carrying that familiar coldness. Oh. You're here, she said flatly, like announcing the weather. I need to talk to both of you. It's about my savings account. Madison raised an eyebrow and stepped aside. Ethan's in his study. Come in. I walked into a house I once thought I'd always be welcome in. The polished hardwood floors, everything neat and staged like a magazine spread. But it felt cold. There wasn't a single trace of a child growing up in this house, apart from a few perfectly framed photos placed in just the right designer-approved spots. Ethan came out of his office, laptop still in hand. Mom, I didn't know you were coming. What's going on? I looked straight at my son. It's about the $15,000 for my savings and the credit card. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to make things clear, once and for all. Ethan placed the laptop on the table and motioned for Madison to sit down too. She leaned back on the couch like she was settling in for a long show. Mom, I know you're upset, Ethan began. But we honestly didn't mean any harm. Everything just piled up. Noah's school costs, insurance, summer program deposits. It was more than we planned. Madison's been trying to manage it all. Madison cut him off. And the truth is, you don't need that money. You live alone. No debt, no rent, no dependents. We have a child to care for. I turned to her. What did you just say? She smiled, unfazed. I said the truth. You live alone. What expenses do you even have? Didn't you say that money was for Noah's future? Well, the future is now, and suddenly you're scrutinizing every penny. I really don't get it. I clenched my fists to steady myself. Madison, I said slowly, this isn't about money. This is about the silence you took advantage of. You didn't ask. You didn't notify. You didn't get permission. You took money I saved over a lifetime and then told me I didn't need it. Ethan chimed in, softer, trying to diffuse. Madison only wants what's best for Noah. She's trying to build a foundation for him. Let's not make this more difficult than it has to be. I turned to him. What's best for Noah? Buy how designer bags, spa getaways, and mystery flights? Ethan, you once told me you wanted to be a voice for the voiceless. So who speaks for me when you're the one handing a fake authorization to the bank? Ethan looked down. Madison's smile thinned but held. You're overreacting. Everything I've done has been for this family. You just don't want to let go. You need to control everything. You like making people ask you, explain to you. You're not helping, you're dictating. I sat down, placing my purse in my lap. You're partly right. I won't help that way anymore, not because I want control, but because I realized my kindness is being treated like an obligation, and my silence has been mistaken for consent. I pulled out a small envelope and set it on the table. Inside are bank statements, a copy of the forged authorization, and the bank's investigation report. I could hand this to a lawyer, but I won't. I won't put Noah in the middle of a war. Madison leaned back. Her eyes shifted, just slightly. The first time I saw a glint of real worry. Ethan opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. I'll say this only once. I'm not a walking ATM with a smile. I'm a mother, a grandmother. And I will care for Noah's future, but in my way. No credit cards, no shadow transactions, no more empty apologies. Madison said nothing. Ethan stayed quiet, head still down. I stood, picked up my bag, and straightened my coat. From now on, if there's an actual expense for Noah, school, medical, or educational programs, send me the invoice, I'll pay it directly. Other than that, don't ask me for anything else. I walked out of that house without waiting for anyone to follow. The rain hadn't stopped, but with each step, I felt lighter. I had spoken plainly, no sugarcoating. No one would mistake my silence for agreement, ever again. And I knew the door closing behind me wasn't an ending. It was a turn I had to make, to protect what truly mattered. After that conversation, I didn't sleep through the night. I lay in the dark, listening to the clock ticking, each second reminding me of a life I had tried to protect with all the devotion I had. And yet, what I got in return were cold stares and cutting words. The next morning, I brewed a pot of coffee and quietly opened an old notebook from my desk drawer. In it were numbers whose ink had faded with time. I stopped at one familiar name, James Carter. James was a friend from an adult education law class we'd taken together in our 50s. We'd stayed in touch after he retired, and I moved closer to Highland Park. He'd once been a well-respected estate and trust attorney in the community. I called, and his voice was as warm as ever. Barbara, I was just thinking about you the other day. What's going on? I need advice, James, about my assets, and about how to protect my grandson from his own parents. He paused. I'm free this afternoon. Meet me at my old office? I still keep the keys, even in retirement. James's office was in a quiet brick house in the older part of town. When I arrived, he was already waiting, 2 cups of tea ready, a stack of folders neatly set on a wooden desk. I knew you'd come eventually, James said gently as I stepped in. The kind of betrayal you've been through, not everyone understands it. I told him everything, from the credit card to the unauthorized withdrawal, and the cold, clipped words Madison had flung at me like I was a stranger without value. James didn't interrupt. He nodded, occasionally jotting a note or two. When I finished, he slid his notebook toward me. "You still want to provide for Noah, don't you? No matter what's happened, I want that boy protected. But I don't want a single dollar of that money falling into Madison's hands, not while she lives like a queen and manipulates everyone around her." "Then we'll set up an independent trust," James said. "It'll be in Noah's name, with you as the trustee until he turns 21. Any disbursements must be for educational or medical needs, with documentation. If he doesn't attend college, the funds will remain until he can show a lawful, stable career plan." I nodded, feeling a weight finally lift from my chest. "And the rest of your estate? Are you thinking of amending your will?" I looked out the window, where the last maple leaves of the season were scattered across the front steps. I once thought I'd leave everything to Ethan, but now I need to set clear boundaries. I want Ethan and Madison removed from the will, unless they agree to a single condition: to undergo independent financial counseling and maintain at least 2 years without any credit violations, verified by a third party. James let out a soft chuckle. "You're still leaving them a way back in." "I'm not trying to tear the family apart," I said, "but I won't allow myself to be disrespected and used just because we share blood." "Very fair," James replied. "I'll draft the papers. And about the credit cards, how would you like to handle that?" "I called the bank this morning. The card has been canceled. A new one will be issued solely in my name with no additional authorized users. I want everything clean from now on." James nodded approvingly. "I'll contact a trusted trust company and set up the fund for Noah exactly as you outlined. Every term will be clearly stated and certified. No one will be able to tamper with it." I sat quietly as James printed out a few drafts. With each signature, I felt a little lighter. Not because I was cutting anyone off, but because I was forcing myself to step out from the shadow of a silent, suffering mother. Once everything was finalized, James looked at me over his glasses. "Do you know what I admire most about you, Barbara?" I shook my head. "It's that you still choose to love even after being hurt. But you're loving smarter." I smiled. Not a triumphant smile, but a relieved one. Because I knew that in order for love to retain its true worth, sometimes boundaries must be set. Not to divide, but to remind people to appreciate what they have. And I had begun to do that, starting today. One Saturday afternoon, my phone rang while I was reading in my favorite armchair. On the other end was Madison, her voice thick with anger and frustration. "Mrs. Barbara, what did you do? My credit card got declined at the mall. I can't believe you'd be so selfish." I set my book down, my voice calm and steady. "Madison, your supplementary card has been canceled by my decision. I can't allow continued access to my account after discovering so many irresponsible charges." She scoffed, her tone smug. "You think you have the right? I'm Ethan's wife, Noah's mother. I'm not some outsider. You can't just remove my name from the card like that." I smiled faintly, feeling the long-held tension inside me tighten like a string. "Madison, you may be someone in other people's eyes, but in this family, you've never shown respect or honesty. I had no other choice." The call ended with a strained voice, leaving me feeling hollow but resolute. Less than a week later, Ethan showed up at my door, his face a mixture of worry and confusion. He handed me a thick envelope containing a photocopy of my updated will and documents related to the trust fund I'd established for Noah. "I know this is shocking, but it's true. You've removed me and Madison from the inheritance, unless we meet the conditions you set." I looked him straight in the eye, my voice firm and unwavering. "If you and Madison don't treat me as family, then I have no reason to hold that place for you on paper. Affection can't be forced by a will." Ethan was silent for a long moment, his eyes clearly stunned. He didn't know how to respond to my unexpected bluntness. That very day, Madison called again, with a clear threat in her voice. Mrs. Barbara, if you don't revoke the conditions in the will, I'll sue you for discriminatory distribution of family assets. You won't have peace. I gave a quiet, fearless laugh. Madison, I'm long used to threats. The truth will reveal who's fair and who's exploiting family ties. This battle wasn't just fought on paper. It unfolded in every glance, every conversation whenever I saw the family. But I didn't back down, because I believed that fairness and respect were the true foundations of lasting bonds. A week after Madison's pressure-filled call, my phone rang again. It was from the elementary school where Noah was enrolled. Principal Thompson's voice was warm but laced with concern, tightening something in my chest. Ms. Barbara, I'm calling about Noah. He's very upset. He said his parents told him you don't love him anymore. Those words pierced my heart like a blade. I swallowed hard and steadied myself. Ms. Thompson, could you explain further? Did Noah say anything else? He said that at home, his parents often complain that you don't provide enough money, that you don't care about his needs. He's confused and doesn't understand why you feel that way. I sat frozen, absorbing every sigh echoing from my own chest. All these years, I had only wanted to be a loving grandmother, a source of warmth and protection. Yet now, my own son and his wife had sown seeds of doubt and loneliness in my grandson's heart. That very day, I printed out all the trust documents, agreements, disbursement terms, verification of educational and medical expenses. I prepared a letter for Noah, using the gentlest words I could to explain that my love for him had never wavered, despite the adult conflicts he couldn't yet understand. The letter I wrote, Dear Noah, I know you may feel confused hearing things that hurt about me, but I want you to know that no matter what happens, my love for you is unconditional and will never change. Everything I do is to make sure you have a bright future, so when you grow up, you can follow your dreams and live a happy life. Please believe in me, and never forget that I'm always here, always loving you. I included copies of the trust documents and asked Ms. Thompson to deliver the letter to Noah privately. Sending those pages was a swirl of emotions. Relief in being able to explain, and heartache knowing my grandson had been pulled into conflicts he never asked for. I knew I couldn't change the past, but I still had the chance to protect the pure bond between a grandmother and her grandchild, and I wouldn't stop trying until Noah understood that, no matter what, I would always be the one who loved him the most in this world. That Christmas Eve, I sat alone in my warm kitchen, a steaming cup of tea on the table, the glow of the Christmas tree lights reflected on the window pane. Outside, snow fell gently, covering the front porch in a soft, white blanket. I had tidied everything up, folded the deep red hand-embroidered tablecloth I always laid out during the holidays. This year, there was no sound of Noah's laughter, no tiny footsteps running through the living room, no Christmas stocking hanging by the fireplace with the words, To Noah, with all my love. I stood up, about to head upstairs to bed when there was a knock at the door. 3 soft knocks, a hesitant rhythm. I opened the door. Standing there was George, Madison's father, the man who had always kept his distance from me since Ethan and Madison got married. He wore a fur-lined hat, his shoulders dusted with snow, his eyes looking older than I remembered. I blinked in surprise and gave a small nod. George? He held out an envelope, his voice deeper than usual. I'm sorry to drop by unannounced, but the boy asked me to give this to you. I took the envelope and saw the scrawled handwriting in colored pencil. To Grandma Barbara. George looked at me for a few seconds, then said in a hushed voice, I've been quietly watching everything, and I know Madison went too far. She thinks love is measured by money, that the boy will love whoever gives him the most. But you're the only one truly thinking about what's best for him. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, staring at him. George clasped his hands together in front of him and said softly, I'm sorry for being cold toward you. I thought my family had everything, but now I realize some things can't be bought. I gave a gentle nod. After he left, I sat down in the armchair by the fireplace and opened Noah's letter. Inside was a crayon drawing. Me and Noah standing in the middle of a park. There was a long bench, a big pine tree, some little squirrels, and beneath it, a crooked line of text that anyone could recognize as a child's handwriting. I love you most in the world. The drawing brought tears to my eyes. A hot drop slid down my hand, quiet as the gratitude swelling in my chest. I ran my fingers gently over the picture and whispered, "You still remember me. No matter what the grown-ups say, your heart is still whole." I looked out the window. The snow was still falling, but something inside me had melted, glowing like a candle in the middle of a winter night. I told myself, in the voice I used long ago for the littlest patients I cared for, I may have lost my son, but I still have my grandson, and I won't let anyone turn love into something that can be bought and sold. Because some kinds of love, just a single page with a few wobbly words, can make the whole winter feel warm. And I will keep holding on to that, no matter what. What would you do if a mother spent her whole youth building a home, raising her child, only to one day be treated like a smiling credit card? What would you do if what they called family turned into something to be bargained over? I'm not telling this story for pity, and I'm not here to accuse anyone. I just want to remind us all that love is the most precious thing a person can give. But if that love is treated like an obligation, exploited, or turned into a tool, it withers, like a plant starved of sunlight. Family, when no longer met with appreciation, may look perfect on the outside, but inside, it's already cracked. And you? Have you ever had to quietly walk away from the people you loved most, just to keep your dignity intact? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because maybe your story deserves to be heard too. If something in my story touched your heart, please hit like, leave a comment, and follow the channel, because ahead of us are still many more stories, real ones, deep ones, fully human, stories about love and its final breaking point.